Each night, a candle is lit, and the whispering tomes open. Inside are the strange, the forgotten, the stories time tried to silence. Some say history is written by the victors, but here the lost are given voice. Breathe deeply and follow me into the hidden chapters of history.
Welcome back. Take a moment to settle in and let the day fall away. Maybe you're getting ready for bed, or simply enjoying a few quiet minutes to yourself. Either way, I'm glad you're here. This is your calm place for the night, a soft space to breathe before sleep. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Seeing all the different places and hours gathered together always adds a little warmth to these evenings. So feel free to share in the comments, and if these peaceful late-night stories help you unwind, be sure to like the video and subscribe, so you never miss the next time we meet here in the quiet. Now, let the room grow still, let your shoulders relax, and we'll begin. You step into a room edged with candlelight, and the winter air follows you in like a careful guest. The flame is steady, the glass is cold. Outside, the night is a quiet blame. In the Alps, winter has always carried both beauty and danger in the same breath, the kind that keeps people honest about limits and luck. Tonight, you move closer to the hearth, and we open an older door. Not the noisy Krampus of postcards and parades, but the quieter figure that stands behind, him older than the name, older than the saint he follows. Think of winter folklore, not as a fantasy, but as a tool made from memory. When nights grew long and food thinned, people didn't tell these stories to pass the time. They told them to guide it. You'll hear why mountain families, living under heavy snow and steep passes, spoke as if the forests and peaks could listen back. You'll see how their rites shaped behavior that kept barns full and children close. Scholars of Alpine tradition point to a pattern that repeats across valleys. Winter customs born from the push to survive, then folded into faith when Christianity arrived, then pressed down, then revived. We'll walk that path. We'll start with the world before names. Before Krampus becomes a single figure, there are winter spirits, guardians at thresholds, judges of waste. Shapes that enforce rules with breath and bear. You'll head out into that older dark, past the fire pits, and along the snow-packed lane, where footsteps and cowbells speak for a village that can't waste a night. The aim is simple. Learn what the rites were doing, and how the dark companion grew from them. You'll keep the facts close. The tone stays calm. The sources that matter here are in folklore researchers. Ethnographies who catalogued masks and rites describe a living system of caution and care. When we talk about fear, we mean useful fear, the kind that keeps someone from wandering off the path. You don't need drama. You need what people did and why they kept doing it. So, let's begin. Winter is outside. The candles are low. The old story waits at the door, and you're ready to walk. Before Krampus, ancient Alpine winter spirits. Step into an Alpine valley long ago. The mountains rise like walls. Snow closes the high passes for weeks, sometimes months. Food depends on autumn work and careful storage. The barns hold grain, hay, tools, and animals whose warmth means milk, traction, and life. Nights run long, and every decision is a test. This is the setting where winter spirits take shape, not as entertainment, but as a vocabulary for risk. You hear it in how people spoke: storms with intent, forests with appetite, stones with memory. This isn't simple superstition. It's animism formed by close contact with hard terrain. When the world feels personal, you treat it with ritual care. Statistically, mountain weather can turn fast. Practically, stories help people move with humility. The belief that something watches the thresholds, doorways, gates, borders keeps them marked, cleaned, and respected. If you light a lamp, speak a verse, or hang a charm, the house stays ordered. Order saves lives. Ethnographies who recorded Alpine customs found layers of household practice that tracked winter needs. Families kept small altars or carved marks near doors and barns. They used evergreen, straw, and grain as tokens of continuity when fields slept. They burned resin or herbs to scent and clear the air. It was symbolic, but also practical. Smoke drives pests, warmth dries damp wood. The language said spirits guarded cattle and tools. The result was regular inspection and care. Across regions, you find beings tied to the season-wide family, later grouped under names like Perkton, often linked to midwinter processions and moral order. It's safer not to claim a single origin myth. What's consistent is function. Winter spirits are guardians and judges. They walk the village to praise thrift and scold waste. They reward tidy stalls and careful hands. They mark out boundaries and remind everyone not to wander into the dark. Think of the cold months as a pressure that forces ritual out into the open. The longer the night, the more a community needs visible signs of resolve. So villagers gather. They set times to check stores, mend fences, and recount rules to children. They frame these checks as pleasing to the powers that attend the season. If the mountains are listening, show them you deserve to stay. You walk the lane at dusk with a small group. Bells sound from the far end, the clanging kind tied to cattle and hung on belts for processions. Torches flicker against the barn walls. People are quiet and deliberate. The purpose is twofold: to be seen by one another, and to be seen in the story's terms, by what walks in winter. Signals of light and sound declare that the village is awake, alert, and not easy to pick off. The wild man figure appears early as a broad Alpine motif, a hairy, untamed presence at the border between the woods and the farm. He embodies the uncontrolled world beasts, cliffs, storm's end. Yet he arrives in a ritual frame, led or bounded by the village. That tension is the point. You model control by showing the wild at your side, not at your throat. Researchers of European masking traditions note that monochrome winter, with its stark contrast, lends itself to duel, roles bright and dark, giver and tester. Even before Christian saints enter the picture, you see pairs, a beneficent figure who brings luck or blessing, and a rough partner who inspects and corrects. The pair encodes social memory. One hand extends, the other warns. Household spirits matter as much as the public pageant. You stand in a stable with the door open and the air cold. A parent rubs the threshold with a branch, sprinkles grain, and speaks a set line that names protection for the herd. Whether one believes in literal spirits or not, The act reinforces vigilance. Sweep the floor, check the latch, count the tools, verify the oil. Winter Panishas lacks habits first. Festivals organize this memory into a schedule. Solstice and the weeks around it act as a hinge. The sun at its lowest, then turning. That astronomical fact becomes a moral arc. If the light returns, you must be worthy to meet it. Community, stage, circuits, visiting every home, testing each doorway with question and answer. What's in the pantry? Are the children mindful? Are the stalls cleaned? The script changes by valley, but the core is shared. Accountability. This is where Perkton-like figures and similar winter beings function as judges. The masks look severe. The behavior is ritualized, not random. Those who pass are praised. Those who fail receive a reminder soot on the face, a light tap with a branch, a sharp clang of a bell near the ear. These gestures aren't meant to harm, they're markers. They leave a trace that says, remember. You can feel why this works. Fear, when yoked to a rule, becomes memory. Memory becomes habit. Habit keeps the herd watered, the paths shoveled, the sledges ready, the firewood dry. There's no mystery in this. Midwinter is lean, and the rites are a communal operating system. By the time Christianity spreads through Alpine regions, this system is anchored. Missionaries and local clergy often blend new feasts with older patterns rather than breaking them. But before that blend, the pre-Christian frame is clear. Winter spirits are tools for holding a group together under stress. Let's pause and collect the pieces you'll carry forward. The setting is Alpine scarcity and risk. The worldview is animistic enough to treat the landscape as responsive. The practices are threshold-focused. Doors, barns, paths. The figures are paired and moral. One blesses, one tests. The tools are light, sound, and simple tokens. Torches, bells, branches, grain, evergreen. The outcome is disciplined survival. You stand again on the lane and look toward the ridge. The sky is hard and bright with cold. You feel the stories pressing close, useful as a cloak. When the later name Krampus enters the scene, he won't appear from nowhere. He will step out of this same snow, wearing the older tasks of winter spirits, guarding order, policing waste, and keeping people close to the fire and each other. In that sense, the past guides your next steps. The old systems of fear and favor prepared a place for a dark companion to walk beside a giver. When a saint arrives holding gifts, the village already understands that someone should carry the memory of risk. And so the path opens to the next stage, where the ancient winter judge finds a new role at a familiar door. Pagan rituals and winter processions. You step from the stable back into the lane, and the village begins to change shape. Masks come out of trunks. Hides are shaken free of dust. Bells, the big cow kind, are checked for dull clappers and mended straps. You're not at a festival in the modern sense. You're entering a cycle of winter processions born from older rites, where masking, noise, and fire are deliberate tools, ways to map the wild and steady the mind. Early evidence of masking in Alpine valleys points to midwinter as a chosen time when nights stretch and work moves indoors. Scholars of European ritual note that mumming, disguised visiting from house to house, appears as where tight-knit communities need controlled disorder. You're watching that control at work. The lane fills slowly with figures whose faces are not their own. Hair hangs from a hood. Horns arc from a cap carved by a hand that knows wood grain and weight. The mask doesn't fool anyone about identity. It alters it. The person becomes a bearer of a function, a tester, a guardian, a memory made visible. The purpose of fright here isn't random fear. The aim is to scare away harm, or to embody it long enough to tame it. There's a practical side. Sudden noise can startle animals and people from complacency, but the deeper use is social. Each torch, each bell, each mask turns winter into a set of signs you can read. The dark wants to spread. The procession says no further. Torches and cowbells do more than set a mood. Fire in winter is signal and proof. We have fuel, we share light. Smoke marks the path. Bell clangs carry through snow-muffled streets and up the hillsides, drawing boundaries by sound. The whole village hears it and knows where the group is, how many are moving, whether someone has fallen back. If someone is missing, the pattern breaks. You listen, and the pattern holds. The procession is intact. You pass the central square, where a ring of stones outlines a place for public rites. A bundle of evergreen boughs smolders, feeding a thin line of scented smoke into the dark. Spruce, fir, or juniper. Evergreen means life held through cold, and the scent claims the space. Processions often trace a circle around a square, a chapel, or the village edge. To walk the boundary is both legal and sacred. It makes the border known to people and to whatever else is believed to watch. The winter solstice sits inside many of these motions, like a pivot. The sun reaches its low point and turns. Ancient watchers tracked that hinge long before formal calendars. You feel the idea, even if you're not counting days with instruments. The light will return, but you have to meet it ready. So rites focus on cleansing and charge. Noise to break stale air. Fire to mark a core. Visits to test order. The wild man archetype stands at the center of this drama. Hair, horn, and the untamed border you see him sketched in wood and hide around you. He's not a single named spirit yet. He's a role that different valleys shape to their needs. One valley leans into animal traits horns like a ram, teeth carved longs. Another leans into forest, bark, moss, root. What holds across them is liminality. He belongs to edges, the woodline, the riverbank, the threshold. He steps where control is thin and shows that it can be held. When you watch a masked figure approach a door, you see an old lesson. The mask is a tool that teaches. It lets a neighbor, backed by community rules, say harsh truths in a staged frame. A scold from a known face can cause resentment. A rebuke from the wild man feels like fate speaking plain. The message is the same. Mend your fence, tend your stock, teach your child, keep your vows. The mask gives the message weight without malice that lingers. Ethnographies describe how these rounds often paired inspection with gift exchange. Hosts offer bread, nuts, or drink. Visitors leave blessings or warnings. The exchange codes the social contract, generosity balanced by responsibility. If you have, you give. If you're warned, you change. Children stand at the edge of the room, eyes wide, absorbing more than words. The procession writes values into the body's smell of smoke. weight of bells sound, the mild sting of a branch on the sleeve. Now here's where most people mess up when they think about pagan processions. They picture chaos. What you see instead is choreography. The route is known. The order of figures matters. Bright one's blessing. Luck go first or last, depending on local habits. Rough one's checking. Warning. Move in the middle, flanked by steady hands. Torches bracket corners. Bells cluster at crossings where sound needs to travel far. Even the pauses are planned. At wells, at barns, at bridges. These are the organs of the village, the places that keep it alive. Each stop is a vow renewed. You've heard the claim that masking wards off evil by frightening it away. That's one reading. Another, taught by careful scholars, is that masking lets a community look at what it fears without being undone by it. It's like handling a hot coal with tongs. You bring the danger close enough to learn its shape. You don't burn your hand. In winter, the coal is scarcity, darkness, hunger. The tongs are torches, bells, and masks. Sometimes the procession splits roles into clear pairs, a giver and a tester. Before Christian layers, these might be unnamed or carry local titles that translate to beautiful and ugly, bright and rough, summer and winter. The bright figure embodies grace, fertility, good luck, blessings for loom and plough. The rough figure demands order-clean tools, safe paths, fair weights. The work of the season needs both. Without order, gifts are wasted. Without gifts, order is grim. You feel the balance as a rhythm in the route. You come to a narrow street where the sound tightens. Bells amplify in the stone corridor, and the effect is almost tidal. People at windows hold back curtains to watch. A child recites a small verse taught for this night. It's not about performance. It's about proof of learning. The rough figure nods. The bright figure hands a nut or dried fruit. The child looks at both and sees the two hands of Winterone warm, one strict held out together. Masks by design, cross lines. Animal to humans, forest to farm, old to young. Men wear them most often in the records we have, but the values they carry bind everyone. One reason processions favor fur, horn, and hair is that these are materials at hand in mountain economies. Herd animals supply hides and horns. Forests supply bark and root. A mask has to be heavy enough to feel like a roll, but light enough to carry through snow. Makers learn balance. The craft itself becomes a body of knowledge. What weight on the brow keeps the chin free to speak? What angle of horn turns a silhouette frightening at distance, yet clear at the door? You turn and see a figure bathed in sparks, not from fireworks, but from a torch brushing past resin-rich wood. The flare snaps and dies. Even small accidents in winter rites are folded into learning. Carry flame high, keep pitch-soaked brands away from low lintels, clear snow from thatch. Again, ritual and safety weave together. What looks like theater contains instruction. A common mistake is to cast the dark figures only as punishing. In many valleys, they also protect. They chase off those who'd harm the village trespassers, thieves, or simply ill fortune imagined as something that can be moved along. The line between scaring harm away and frightening neighbors into care is thin on purpose. It keeps everyone aligned. The rough figure is dangerous enough to respect, familiar enough to welcome. As you walk, you notice how sound is tuned. Big bells on the hips set a bass that carries far. Smaller bells at the wrist add a chatter that fills close spaces. Wood clappers break rhythm to mark turns or stops. Voices come in short calls, not songs. This isn't about melody's code. These tones tell the group when to bunch up, when to spread, when to quiet. Speaking of the solstice, there's often a moment where the procession halts and looks up. No sermon, just a shared gaze at the night sky. You feel the cold on your face and the heat on your palms. You belong to a line of winters older than any single name. That sense of age gives the mask behind you more force. He's not just your neighbor in a suit. He's this valley's memory of how to last. Before we continue, you need to understand how the wild man helps define borders. Villagers sit near forests for wood and pasture. The forest holds both bounty and threat. By walking a horned figure to the very edge of trees and back. The village rehearses a claim. We can face the wood and return home. Do that enough nights, and children grow into adults who know paths, keep bearings, and read whether by sound and scent. The rite stores knowledge in muscle and nerve. Now, a quiet correction to another modern myth. These processions weren't always loud from start to finish. Silence plays a part. At some doors, the bell's still. A hand knocks. A question is asked. Softly, are you ready? Is the grain dry? Have you kept faith? The hush lets the words land. After, the bells flood back in as release. Noise and quiet, like bright and rough, work as a pair. The craft of masking deepens. A maker chooses, would not just for look, but for the way it sounds when struck or shaken. A hollowed mask can carry the voice, turning it into something deeper. Fur is sewn for movement, not just heat, so that a turn of the shoulder ripples like a creature alive. These choices matter because they shape how people feel the presence. The more convincing the mask, the more persuasive the lesson, yet the rule holds. The person underneath remains under control. The wild visits. It doesn't break loose. Let me show you exactly how a single visit might go. The group enters a courtyard. Torches settle in brackets. The bright figure greets the household with a blessing for work and rest. The rough figure surveys the ground, no holes near the well, no tools left to rust. He taps a bucket rim with a stick, checks the hinge on the gate, glances at the roofline for sag. Then a short exchange, a promise to mend, a vow to watch the paths after snowfall. A small gift changes hands, and a marksoot or a chalk line touches a beam to show the visit happened. Then bells, a bow, and the group moves on. The reason this works is predictable psychology matched to harsh weather. When the outside world closes in, people need ritual to keep inner worlds from fraying. Processions use repetition to anchor attention. Masks focus the mind on archetypes. Fire and sound fight the monotony that eats morale. And all of it turns winter into a story that puts you, your neighbors, and the land in the same frame. You're not at the mercy of the season. You're speaking to it, and through that speech, you stay aligned. As the night thins, the route draws to a close. The torches hiss out in snow. Bells fade. The masks come off. Back in the house, where they were stored. Faces return. There's a brief quiet as roles settle back into names. Then the low talks star-suited well. What went wrong? Where a fence needs mending at first light. The ritual ends, but its work continues into tomorrow's tasks. Moving on quietly. Here's the gentle summary that bridges us forward. You've seen how early Alpine processions used masks, bells, and torches to patrol the border between wild and home, fear and order. The wild man's hair and horns, the controlled fright, the checks at doors each part, taught a rule, and bound the village together. Hold that picture, because soon a saint will enter the frame. And this careful pairing of blessing and warning will find a new name and a night to call its own. Christianity arrives. Krampus meets Saint Nicholas. You stand at the same threshold, and the mask beside you has changed its company. The rites you've walked, bells, torches, the wild man at the edge don't vanish. They meet a new figure with a book, a blessing, and a sack. This is how Christianity often moved through mountain valleys, not by erasing winter customs, but by pairing them with saints who spoke to the same need. Here, the name that takes root is Nicholas. You'll see why that match works. In Christian memory, Nicholas is a patron of children, sailors, and the poor known for acts of quiet provision. In Alpine winters, that profile becomes practical. Gifts aren't luxury, they're aid. Grain, a measure of dried fruit, a coin for oil. When the calendar places his feast at the start of December, it lands at a moral checkpoint. Stores counted, storms arriving, hearts tested. The village already has a winter schedule. Nicholas steps into it like a beam set onto a ready frame. Leading scholars of European Christianization point out a common strategy. Adopt and redirect. Rather than banning all midwinter processions that carry local power, clergy bless the parts that teach Christian charity and restrain the parts that threaten disorder. The pair, you've sin bright giver. Rough Testobi comes Sin Nicholas with a dark companion. The names vary by valley and language, but the structure holds. The saint brings reward for good conduct. The companion enforces memory of risk and consequence. It's the old moral circuit speaking a new dialect. Now you walk the lane again, and this time the order is clear. Nicholas, robed calm, carrying a book, moves with attendance. He represents a judged life, deeds weighed, promises kept. The wild figure remains, but his role shifts. He's no longer a free emblem of forest and cold. He stands as a bound force, a reminder of what must be bridled, appetite, rage, wandering, neglect. The older winter judge doesn't disappear. He kneels into a Christian story of restraint and mercy paired. December 5th emerges as the night the pair appear. The threshold to Nicholas's feast day on the 6th. A threshold night fits the older logic. Crossings matter. Doors, bridges, solstice. The edge is where you put your signs. On this night, households expect a visit. Children rehearse small versus short prayers, lines of catechism, or simple pledges to help with chores and mind the paths. The ritual inspects the home in Christian terms: kindness, honesty, diligence. And yet the echo you recognize is the same. The tester taps with a branch. The giver reaches with fruit or a nut. The framework holds. You might ask why villagers welcomed both. The answer is, in the winter they knew. Happiness without caution rings faults in deep snow. Caution without hope crushes morale. Nicholas embodies gift and grace. His companion embodies memory and limb. Together they mirror the season, warmth beside cold, light beside night. If you remember nothing else, remember this pairing as a tool. It's not about scaring children into obedience for sport. It's about staging the demands of survival in a form the whole village can carry. The book Nicholas holds isn't just a prop. It frames accountability. Names written in it symbolically suggest that deeds are seen and remembered. That idea lived already in winter custom. The village notices who tends stalls and who leaves gates ajar. Christianity codifies this watchfulness into a moral ledger. The dark companion's presence underscores the cost of neglect, but he does it under the saint's eye. That order matters. The wild is present, but it's not sovereign. You step into a house where the pair has been invited. The room smells of stored apples and smoke. Nicholas asks a child to speak a line they've learned. The child stumbles, then finds it. The companion in fur and horn shifts weight but doesn't loom. When the child finishes, relief softens the room. A parcel of nuts and dried fruit moves from saint to small hands. The companion's bells give a low note, a reminder that effort is praised, not luck alone. In the ethnographic record, you see a careful continuity. The branches used by the companion, often birch already, belong to Christian rites of cleansing and boundary. Christianity takes the birch and hands it meaning as correction and discipline. In line with teachings about training the young, the bells remain, the torch remains, but moves outdoors or into safer brackets. The saint's staff and mitre carry church authority, but the visit still checks wells, yards, and barns. The story changes uniforms. The job stays the same. Now here's where most people mess up in retellings. They treat the dark companion as a late invention of Christian morality, a slap-on scarecrow to police children. But the older winter tester pre-existed. Christianity adopted him, named him, and put him under a saint's governance. This protects the community from both extremes. No unchecked frenzy in the mask. No saccharine indulgence in the gift. Balance, again, is the method. The dual symbolism grows richer. On the one hand, generosity, food shared, hands warm, a blessing spoken over the work of the house. On the other, memory of risk. The branches sting, the bells tone, the sight of horn and fur at the door. You can read this as theology in practice, mercy without amnesia, or as community psychology, encouragement without naivety. The ritual makes both true in the body. The child laughs and eats. The parent ties a new knot in the gate rope at the same night. You'll hear references to dark companions across wider European traditions, bound to midwinter. Saints, not only Nicholas. The pattern is consistent. The saint is a focus of Christian charity and teaching. The companion reflects older, local winter forces that disciplined conduct. In Alpine regions, terrain and weather intensify the need, so the companion takes on stronger features. Horns of herd animals, furs that answer the cold, heavy bells from mountain pasture. This isn't random decoration. It's material culture speaking. People use what they have to signal what they value and fear. At village scale, adoption brings regulations. Clergy and local councils set guidelines. Routes approved, hours fixed, masks restrained from real harm. The church's language reframes the companion with chains, a visual marker that the old force is bound. You'll see those chains added later with emphasis, but the idea is present now. Winter's wildness is acknowledged, not worshipped. It serves the lesson under the cross's sin. Before we continue, you need to understand the appeal of Nicholas as a winter patron in mountain places. He stands for provision and scarcity. Stories of him giving in secret align with the Alpine habit of mutual aid that doesn't humiliate. When neighbors leave wood at a widow's door or extra grain at a threshold, they're acting inside both customs at once. The old winter ethic of shared survival and the Christian call to care. Nicholas is a narrative that lets generosity be a right, not a favor that must be repaid. As December 5th settles in the bones of community practice, the night becomes a stage for teaching more than rules. It carries a mood. Anticipation keeps children alert all day. The sound of the first bell at dusk makes the hair rise. Households tidy and prepare small plates. A prayer is said that names both gratitude and resolve. The visit arrives. Laughter and fear braid together and then settle into calm as the pair departs. The memory lingers, not as trauma, but as a line to walk until spring. You'll notice too how the village uses the pair to map social trust. The saint's procession reaches every house. No doorway is beneath it. That's moral geography. All belong to the circle of care and correction. If a home is skipped, it says something is broken between them and the community, which then calls for repair. The route itself is a census of well-being. There are limits, and honest ones. Sometimes zeal runs ahead of wisdom. A mask frightens too hard. A branch lands with more force than custom allows. That's where Christian oversight and local rule meet, to correct the corrector. The goal is not to satisfy the masked man's appetite for power. It's to guard the balance that makes the right work. The community learns, adjusts, and states the rule again. We walk the line, not leap over it. The dark companion beside Nicholas crystallizes a truth you've felt since the first lane walk. Winter makes adults of villages. You don't get to choose the season's terms. You choose your response. The church's adoption offers a shared language to renew that response each year. The saint says, "Here is grace." The companion says, "Remember the cost of forgetting." Together, they say, "Stay close, stay kind, stay ready." Let me show you exactly how the night closes. After the last house, the group returns to a hall or a stable. The saint's garb is set aside with care. The mask is lifted and laid onto a shelf. People sit with warm drink mold. Spice stand, speak plainly. Who needs extra wood? Who's had a calf early? Who fell on the ice path and needs a new cleat? The ritual's theater funnels into lists and tasks. Faith and folklore end in chores. That's not a demotion. It's the point. If this calms you, save it to your playlist. Because the next piece will shift from roles to forms. Once a role is kept year after year, it starts to need a face you can draw, a suit you can mend, a sound you can name from 2 streets away. The companion acquires features: fur, horn, hoof, chain, basket. that carry meanings layered from older rites and new rules. You're ready to meet that figure as he takes shape, one symbol at a time, bound but never forgotten, standing just behind the scent at the door. The appearance of Krampus. You stand at the doorway on a cold December dusk, and the shape beside Nicholas resolves into a figure you can name Krampus. Not a random monster, but a body built from older Alpine signs, stitched into a single presence that a child can recognize and an elder can read. Fur, horn, hoof, bell, chain, and basket each piece carries a lesson, and together they form the dark companion's face. Start with the fur. In mountain economies, fur is not only warmth, it's the language of the herd and the hunt. The suit of thick hide links Krampus to livestock whose survival underwrites the village's winter. You see goat or sheep evoked in the texture and weight, a reminder that animals feed, clothe, and keep you alive. Wearing fur folds the wild back into the household. It says the same thing the old rites said. You live because you manage the lives of beasts, and you owe them care. The wild man is not wolf-sleek, he's barn-heavy. That choice ties fear to husbandry. Now the horns, ram or ibex, like curves, rise from the mask with deliberate height. Horns mark status among herd animals. They also mark danger at the edge of cliffs. In Alpine art and costume, horn silhouettes read quickly against snow and sky. They are a visual shorthand for power that isn't yours to command. Scholars of Alpine masking point out that horns aren't just devil markers borrowed later. They're pastoral emblems first, tied to mountain stock and the peril of rocky pasture. On Krampus horns signal the force that tests you when you leave the fence line. Stay alert. Hooves follow, sometimes suggested, sometimes worn as strapped clogs that thud and slip with a distinct sound on ice. The hoofstep is practical stagecraft. You hear the companion coming before you see him, but it also places him in the herd's world. Hoof marks in snow are a sign you read all winter, tracking animals to count them or to know what wandered near. On this figure, hoof hints at the border between domesticated and untamed. It turns the floor into a field you must cross carefully. To face, carved, elongated, with a jaw that shows fang or a tongue that lolls. Here the mask maker balances clarity with charge. A long tongue can mock boastfulness. Fangs speak consequence. Yet the eyes cut out let a neighbor see enough human to remember the rule. The roll warns. The person cares. Wood is the medium for a reason. Alpine carvers work in larch alder, spruce woods that hold detail and wear well. Knife marks stay visible, and that handmade surface keeps the figure in the realm of community craft, not supernatural apparition. You're meant to learn from it, not flee into the dark. Bells hang low and heavy from a belt. They're the same cowbells that mark animals on summer pasture. Around Krampus, the sound becomes a mobile boundary. When he moves through a street, the village knows where the rite is, where children should gather or keep distance. The bass of large bells and the clatter of smaller ones build a soundscape that wraps the visit in presence. The point isn't volume alone, it's signal. The wild is here, but it follows a route. That predictability is comfort disguised as menace. Then the switch's birch rods bound together. You've seen branches in older rites as tools of purification at thresholds. In Krampus's hand, the bundle becomes a language of correction. A light tap marks a lesson, not a wound. Birch, smooth-barked and flexible, symbolizes new growth in late winter lore. Using birch frames discipline as pruning, not rage. You leave the encounter marked in mind, not body. Chains enter later, a choice shaped by church and council. They clink from Krampus's wrists or drape across his chest, asserting that the force he represents is bound. This is Christian grammar layered onto pagan roots. The wild submits to order. The sound of chain also adds a second register to the bell's hard, short, metallic. It punctuates the rhythm and signals moments for hush or caution. Even without a single spoken word, chain and bell set talk and silence into place. The wicker basket rides on Krampus's back. In some tellings it implies taking away those who fail the test. In practice, the basket carries props and small gifts, or collects offerings for a communal table. The image does its work regardless. Winter removes what you don't: guard, time, stock, safety. A basket is a tool for moving weight. Seeing it makes you think about what gets carried from house to house: warnings, promises, and, just as often, extra food for those who need it. Regional variation matters, but not in the way tourist brochures suggest. Instead of fixing on one valley's exact mask style, pay attention to how terrain shapes features. Where forests press close, bark and moss motifs grow. Where rock dominates, horns and bones stand out. In places with strong herding, bells become larger, straps thicker, gaits slower. In crafts strong towns, carving is finer. In others, hides do more of the work. All of it says the same thing with different accents. This figure is made from what the valley knows. You watch a maker at the bench. He tests the mask's balance so it doesn't wrench a neck on steep street. Straps are lined to avoid bite. Fur is cut to move with leg and arm without tangling around fire. Safety and symbols share the same seam. This is how rites survive, by being workable. A Krampus who can't see the step or breathe in the square is a burden, not a teacher. The best costumes carry their weight like well-fitted packs. Common mistakes in modern retellings flatten the figure into a villain who steals children. The record shows a different emphasis. Fear is present, but it's bounded and purposeful. The soot mark on a cheek, the click of chain on a doorstep, the tap of birch on a coat piece are ritual cues, not harms. They turn the moment into a story that a child retells with a shiver and a smile, and that an adult uses to remember the fence that needs mend at first light. Another mistake imagines a single ancient script. Alpine culture is a patchwork. Processes rhyme. Details vary. Some Krampus masks, lean animal. Others demon-like, under Christian influence. Some companions speak, others remain silent, letting bell and chain do the talking. But the through line holds: Krampus is the winter tester, standing under the saint's eye, wearing the old wild and the newer restraint at once. Here's the shortcut. Nobody teaches plainly. If you want to read Krampus, read the materials. Wood, hide, horn, bell, chain, basket. These are not spooky choices. They're the core kit of mountain life. Each object does double duty. It's useful in the day and symbolic at night. That overlap is what made the figure stick. You don't need imported myths when your own tools carry the lessons you need. Think of Krampus as a ledger written in things. Fur says, keep the herd. Horn says, respect the edge. Hoof says, bell says, stay together. Birch says, correct in time. Chain says, bind your visors. Get says, what's taken can be shared back. The figure is a walking list of winter virtues. You step back into the street after the visit. The bells recede. Children breathe again, and so do you. Behind the fright sits a structure you can trust. The companion looks fierce, but he follows rules older than any single name. He is winter's hand on your shoulder, steering you away from the ditch. You don't adore him. You don't hate him. You acknowledge him, and in doing so, you honor the older winters that taught your valley how to last. A gentle summary as we turn the page. Krampus's appearance isn't random costume. It's a careful assembly of Alpine materials that carry pre-Christian meaning, bound by Christian framing into a companion who tests and guards. Fur, horn, hoof, bell, chain, and basket each teach a small rule. Together, they build a presence that keeps a village alert and kind. Next, you'll see how those tools are read up: close birch rods, chains, and the baskets. So you can hear the precise language the dark companion speaks. Birch rods, chains, and the basket. You step a little closer to the doorway so you can see the tools in Krampus's hands as language, not just threat. Birch, chain, basket, 3 old symbols, layered by custom and church, each carrying a rule you can keep. Start with the birch. In Alpine winters, birch is one of the first trees to green after deep cold. Its bark is pale, easy to spot against snow. Its young rods are supple, quick to bundle, and slow to splinter. In pre-Christian rites, branches swept thresholds to clear what clung to door and lintel at year's end. That sweeping was symbolic cleansing, but it had practical edges. Ash and dust moved outside. Pests and damp were driven off. What home was reset. When the winter tester carried birch, he brought that meaning to the door. The rod said, renew the boundary. Don't let neglect pile up where you live. Now, in the Christian frame, the birch becomes a tool of correction, not cruelty. A light tap is an embodied reminder. It marks a lesson on the sleeve, not a bruise on the skin. You know the difference as soon as you see it done. The bundle lands on a coat with a whisper more than a crack. The person under the mask watches faces, not just rules. Discipline is framed as pruning, taking off what's dead so new growth can come in spring. The term Krampus is often connected to words meaning claw or to seize. But what matters in practice is grasp with intent. The rod takes hold of a bad habit before it sets. You remember and you adjust. The thing most people miss is how birch marks space as much as bodies. A rod drawn along a threshold line says, this is in, that is out. In older winter rounds, a sweep across a barn sill called the herd to safety after pasture. In Nicholas processions, a sweep past a hearth grouped the family at the core. Children watched, and the motions sank in. Boundaries keep you alive when snow softens edges, and night erases past. The rod is a stylus, that redraws your map each year. Now to chains, you hear them before you understand them. Short, hard clinks cutting through bell tone. In earlier Wildman rolls, you won't always find chain. It takes Christian grammar to make it central. Chain, say, the old force is present but bridled. They serve like punctuation in the visit's speech. A single tug and rattle at the threshold signals hush. A longer drag across stone marks a move from warning to blessing or back again. You feel the room respond. Sound governs attention. Chains also carry a second layer. They name visas as things you can tie down. Anger, waste, pride, drift call them by whatever terms your village uses. The chain says they're not rulers of the house. They can be bound, linked to anchor points, like prayer, habit, and neighborly watch. The reason this works is that people move better with metaphors they can touch. A chain in the hand gives weight to promise. I'll stop leaving the gate open changes when the masked figure lifts a link and nods. There's a craft logic, too. Chains on a costume distribute load. They shift some weight off belts and onto shoulders, keeping bells steady and fur from snagging. Make us learn how much clink carries in narrow streets, how to wrap links so they won't bruise or pinch. Safety and symbol travel together again. A chain that hurts breaks the right. A chain that sings keeps everyone in the same story. Now the basket. Wicker on the back is old technology in mountain life. You carry wood, fodder, tools, food, and sometimes a sleeping child from house to house. In ritual, that basket becomes a moving image of removal. Winter takes what you don't guard time, harvest, attention, even temper. When Krampus turns so the basket is in view, he shows cost. The image you heard children stolen away hits harder in print than in life. In practice, villagers set tight lines around the visit. The basket carries props, treats, or offerings collected for later sharing. The story sharpens the lesson. Nothing is taken if the house is in order, if promises hold, if boundaries stand. You watch a small exchange. A child recites a short verse. A parent vows to mend a fence by the next thaw. The masked figure taps the threshold with birch, rattles chain once, then reaches back to draw a wrapped handful of nuts from the basket. The parcel lands in small hands. The message is direct. Correction first, then gift. The basket's best work is to turn memory forward. It sends something into tomorrow food to eat, a chore to do, a mark on a list. Ritual that doesn't spill into work fades by morning. This one doesn't. Speaking of words, let's touch the name's shape. One etymology ties Krampus to terms for claw or hook, the grasp that holds or snatches. Another line of folk understanding hears in it the sound of cramping, seizing, tightening in cold. You don't need to settle the root to feel the sense. The dark companion takes hold of looseness. The rod, the chain, the basket each is a way to grasp what would drift. Hooks and handles matter in winter. You tie down tarps, hang tools off pegs, lash sledges. Krampus is a figure made of grip. Here's a quick test you can run as you listen to a visit. Does the rod fall in rhythm, or does it lash? Rhythm means rule. Does the chain speak in cues, or does it clamor without sense? Cues mean care. Does the basket face the room when gifts are given, or is it swung like thread? Facing means service. These are checks that elders and clergy have made for generations, when the rite threatened to slip, especially in the periods when outside pressure tried to suppress or tame the custom. Communities that kept it healthy taught these checks by example. A small micro-story. A winter long ago, a masked figure went too far, scaring a child who'd lost a parent that year. The next night, the council met. They set a rule: no sudden grabs, no yanking at coats, no chasing beyond the threshold. The chain would clang at the door, not in the yard. The rod would touch only cloth. The basket would carry food to the widow's house at the end of the round. The rite held, because it adjusted. That's how these symbols live, under watch, under love. Let me show you how each tool reads in different corners of the Alps, without pinning down a single village. In dense forest belts, birch sweeps grow elaborate, lines drawn around wells and woodpiles to keep the work cores safe. In stone-heavy high slopes, chain tone cuts crisp between walls, used to pace steps on ice and call for aid if someone slips. In dairy-strong valleys, the basket bulges with shared food, a public sign that surplus will flow toward need before hunger can bite. Variation sits on the surface. Function stays at the heart. Common mistakes to avoid as you retell this. Don't inflate harm to heighten drama, and don't strip warning to make it cute. The balance is the lesson. Birch without sting means rules are empty. Chain without restraint means power runs wild. Basket without giving means the story haunts. The old pairing you've walked all night, blessing and boundary lives in these three tools. The reason this symbol set endures is that it maps straight to winter tasks. Birch is for sweeping and pruning. Chain is for binding and securing. Basket is for carrying and sharing. Put them in one figure's hands, and you've written a winter catechism in objects. A child who can't read a book can read this. An adult who is tired at year's end can lean on this when memory falters. Before we move, here's the gentle summary you can hold like a pocket chart. Birch redraws lines and corrects in time. Chain declares the wild bound and turns promise into weight. Basket shows that what winter takes can be managed, and what community has can be shared. Together they take fear out of the dark and hang it on pegs you can use. Now the tools are clear. We can step into the night, built for them the threshold. Evening when bells drift through snow, when the dark companion and the saint walk house to house, and the village rehearses how to last another year. Krampus nacht, the night of the dark companion. You feel the night tighten, as if the air itself holds a breath. Krampus nacht begins in small sounds. A strap pulled through a buckle, a bell tested once, then stilled. Snow hushes the lane. Doors glow at the edges. This is the evening when the dark companion walks with the saint, and the village rehearses what it knows about danger, kindness, and the cost of forgetting. Bells drift first, low and far, telling you the route has started at the edge and is moving inward. In many Alpine towns, the order is agreed in advance. Streets mapped, stops set, hours bounded, so the presence is strong but not wild. That planning keeps the rite alive. You hear the bass bells on hips, then the lighter chime near hands. A moving wall of sound that announces approach long before a knock. Men in costume aren't roaming at random. They travel with Saint Nicholas in a deliberate procession. The saint, robed and calm, holds the book. The Krampus figures bracket him like living punctuation, their chains and bells setting the rhythm of the visit. Attendants walk with baskets and lists. Each house has prepared a lamp near the door, a swept threshold, a small plate for gifts or alms, and children ready with memorized lines. The door opens to a question, soft but formal. Are you ready? Krampus stands in the door's margin, not in the room, reminding you he's a test, not a guest. Nicholas asks for a verse, a promise, a small proof of learning. Children speak short prayers, pledges to help with chores, a line about honesty or care for the herd. When the line falters, the saint waits. Krampus shifts his weight, bells whispering. The room's attention holds. The marking that follows is measured. A tap with birch to a sleeve, a soot line on a cheek, sometimes a light rattle of chains against the sill. These gestures aren't punishments. They're memory cues. Ethnographies describe them as ritual traceholes, signs that a threshold was kept and a lesson named. You feel how they work. The soot smudge lasts an hour. The tap leaves a sensation that lingers just long enough to anchor a chain. Gifts move after correction. A handful of nuts, a dried apple, a ginger biscuit, sometimes a small coin. The saint hands them out. Krampus may lift the basket or stand guard at the door so the exchange feels earned rather than thrown. These are not lavish presents. They're tokens of shared survival, the kind of food that stores well and comforts without waste. In lean winters, the plate also gathers offerings for neighbors who need more. Sound and light govern the choreography. Torches stay outside or in fixed brackets. Lamps burn low inside. Bells speak time. A short burst for arrival. A roll while the saint talks. A sharp chain note for hush. Then a long swell as the group departs. Children learn those cues without a word, and years later, as adults in costume, they'll play the same notes to shape another child's night. The route maps the village's organs. Wells, barns, bridges, and steep corners get extra attention. At the well, Krampus taps the stone curl. Nicholas blesses the water. At the barn, a bell rings, once for each stall. A hand checks the latch. At a bridge, chains drag once across the planksa, signal to walk slow in frost. The old wild is present, but it's harnessed to service. You see again how the rite translates risk into agreed signals. Sometimes there's a public pause in a square. People gather at a distance while the pair stands before a small temporary shrine, evergreen and a candle, maybe a simple cross. Nicholas speaks a short blessing for winter work, for wood splitting, for safe paths, for fair trade. Krampus circles the crowd once, bells steady, reminding with movement that the boundary between crowd and cold is thin. Then the route resumes. No sermon stretches too long. The night is not for speeches. A common mistake is to think the fear is meant to peak here. But the rite aims for steady tension, not shock. The wild companion looms at thresholds and corners, rarely chasing into the dark. Rules curb excess. No grabbing, no sudden grabs at children, no unscripted fright. Councils and clergy have repeated these safeguards for generations, precisely because they preserve the mood without harm. The purpose is memory, not injury. You notice the social weave under the costumes. A house that struggled last year gets more time. A widow's door draws the last stop when baskets are fullest and tempers warmest. A family with a new calf receives a quick check in the barn. Krampus lifts a link of chain to block a curious child from the icy yard. The saint's book closes with a nod, and the neighborly list opens. Who needs hands for wood? Who should walk whom to market after the storm? The emotional arc of the night is clean. Anticipation all day. A tightening at dusk. The awe and nerves as the first bell reaches your street. Focus as the pair enters. Release as they leave. Replaced by laughter and a rush of chores remembered. Then food and drink back at the table, simple things. Nuts, dried fruit, a mulled cup shared. The same items the saint just handed out, closing the circle between gift and hearth. Children will talk about the tongue, the horns, the bells. Adults will talk about the fence, the path, the forecast. Both conversations of the same education in different keys. The visible symbol keeps the rules sticky. The practical talk turns them into action. Snow is coming. Check the roofline. Ice is likely. Sand the slope. A mask and a bell got you to care. Care gets you to work. Now, Krampusnacht also stores the year's small moral housekeeping. The soot mark can be a quiet amends. The tap away to say, we noticed, and we still want you with us. A stubborn quarrel can soften when the saint stands between two neighbors and asks them both for a verse. Patience, fairness, a commitment to measure wheat straight. Ritual lets pride give way without a speech. People accept correction from a mask easier than from a rival. If you listen in the lane after the group moves on, you catch the aftersound. Windows closing. A child's relieved laugh, boots scuffing as someone runs to check a gate. Bells fade to a dot on the far hill. The night spreads back into its own hush. You feel steadier than before. The test came and went. You held your part. Tomorrow will be work, not worry alone. A brief historical note to tie this to the record. Accounts from Alpine ethnographies across the late 19th and 20th centuries described these rounds with remarkable consistency. Scheduled routes, pairings of blessing and warning, careful limits on fright, and after-ritual sharing. Suppression edicts came and went, but villages kept aversion alive by holding to function over spectacle. The night's strength lies in its purpose, not its shock value. As the last bells vanish, the square empties. Masks return to hooks. Furs steam near doors. The saint's robe is folded and set away. You stand a moment longer at your own threshold and feel the line under your feet. In, safe, out, cold. The dark companion did his work. The saint did his. Now the village does yours. Sleep, wake, and keep the rules that kept your grandparents. Gentle summary before we cross into the next stretch. Krampusnacht isn't mayhem. It's a mapped night of teaching, house by house, rule by rule, where fear is bound to care and gift to resolve. Bells, birch, chain, and basket speak a language everyone understands. The village remembers together, then rests. Next comes the tension of history times. when councils and clergy tried to quiet this night, and how the custom bent without breaking 8 suppression attempts, bans, warnings, and the 20th century. You wake to a quieter winter. The bells are fewer. Notices are posted at the town hall. The same valley that walked Krampus-necked with care now faces a different kind of order edicts from church pulpits, municipal councils, and later national authorities who distrust the mask, the noise, and the old wild standing at the door. Start with the church warnings. Periodically, clergy judged the dark companioned rough, too close to fear for its own sake. Sermons urged restraint or proposed replacement with purely pious visit sins without shadows. The language sounded familiar. Protect the young, avoid excess, keep devotion clean. You can understand the impulse. Any rite that leans on fright needs guardrails. But blanket condemnations risked severing the thread that tied gift to boundary. Villagers listened, adjusted details, and often kept a pair. The logic held. The child learns best when mercy and Limmy arrive together. Then come municipal cautions. As towns grew and streets tightened with new buildings, officials cited safety, fire risk from torches, disorder from crowds, damage to shops if a run turned too wild. Councils issued permits, curfews, route maps with narrower scope. You recognize some of this as good governance, born of experience. A torch to near a shutter could flash a resin streak into flame. A poorly strapped bell could bruise a passerby. Regulation, when measured, preserved the right, but bans sometimes went blunt, driven by officials who saw all masking as misrule. The 20th century sharpened suppression. In several periods, centralizing governments sought to standardize culture, promoting neat, healthy holiday forms and discouraging customs that projected menace or rural grit. Campaigns cast the dark companion as harmful to children or backward in taste. Posters showed smiling, sanitized figures. Pamphlets urged parents to choose modern celebrations. Some areas faced outright bans on masked winter rounds, justified by public order or moral uplift. You watch the custom bends. Villagers held quiet aversions in private courtyards. The saint arrived alone at the door, with an attendant carrying a single bell tucked in a coat. Birch rods hid as broom handles. Chains stayed home, replaced by a tap on a door frame and a glance that said the rest. The function persisted: visit, vow, small gift, shared list for the week's Nidzivan. When the mask hung on a peg, you see how resilient a rite can be when its work matters more than its show. Mid-century anxieties layered on. Child welfare advocates, some sincere, some swept up in broader moral waves, warned that fright scarred the young. Educators proposed new scripts, only praise, gentle stories, no dark shapes or stern questions. In a few towns, newspapers ran cautionary pieces after isolated incidents where a performer broke rules. Those cases mattered. They confirmed what elders already knew. Without discipline, the mask fails. Communities responded by codifying what had long been custom. No chasers, no chasers, no entering rooms without invitation, no blows beyond a light tap to cloth. You can hear the tension between spectacle and teaching. As outside pressure mounted, some groups pushed back by making the figure louder, leaning into shock as identity, that raised more alarms and invited stricter bans. Others did the wiser thing. They doubled down on purpose. Routes were planned with precision. Captains assigned to keep pace and watch conduct. Costumes inspected for safe vision and secure strap. Torches replaced with lanterns in tight lanes. The best defense against suppression was competence. In the archive of local rules, you find simple, smart refinements. No open flame below eaves. Bells padded to avoid edge strike. Chain ends blunted and wrapped. Birch bundles sized to whisper, not whip. Mask mouths carved wide enough for clear speech and breath. Eye holes enlarged for steps in snow and ice. Costumes built to distribute weight and allow a free hand for aid if someone slipped. These details look small on paper. In the lane, they're the difference between a rite that harms and a rite that holds. Speaking of harm, it's honest to admit that some bands followed real disorder. Urban migrations brought larger crowds. Alcohol turned a few processions into street brawls, misusing the Krampus suit as cover. In those moments, authorities were right to act. Villagers that wanted the custom kept alive learnt to draw bright lines. Family hours separated from adult gatherings. Parades cordoned with stewards. Performers registered and trained. Routes posted and enforced. The mask went back under community control, not left to impulse. Crutch positions also evolved, where clergy saw the companions serving a moral end discipline, paired with grace approach, returned, often with pastoral oversight. Parish halls hosted staging areas. Priests blessed the masks not to sacralize fear, but to commit the performers to restraint. Nicholas' visits emphasized care for the poor, turning the basket into a carrier for food collection rather than a prop for threat. The theology stayed clear. The wild is bound, the saint leads. Charity is the point. You stand in a year when the custom is officially off the streets. Yet at dusk, you hear a bell inside a courtyard. A door opens. A calm voice asks for a verse. A child speaks. A soft tap lands on a sleeve. A small parcel changes hands. The chain is missing, but the lesson remains. Suppression can silence symbols in public, but it cannot easily erase a community's winter logic, where the need persists to remember risk, to tie gift, to order people, find forms to carry it. The reason attempts to erase the dark companion rarely last is practical. The pair solves a real problem. It teaches vigilance without cruelty and generosity without naivety. Replace it with bright cheer alone, and rules loosen. Replace it with scolding alone, and morale drops. Keep both, and children grow into adults who sweep thresholds, share food, and listen for storms. Authorities who learned this shifted from bans to guidance. The custom survived by proving its use. A quick checkpoint on accuracy. Historical records show cycles, warnings and curbs, then quiet persistence, then sanctioned returns under rules. The dates in decrees differ by region, but the pattern is consistent. Ethnographies noted that the more a village tied the right to concrete welfare wood for elders, food for widows, safety checks, the harder it was to argue against it. Folklore that lifts the weak is hard to ban. Limits deserve respect. Even now, the line between healthy fright and harm is thin. Performers must remember the role's purpose. Parents must read a child's face. Councils must keep roots safe. Clergy and teachers must reinforce the pairing praise with corrections. So the companion never becomes a license for bullying, and the saint never becomes empty sugar. The rite stands or falls on that balance. You'll walk home through a century's worth of snow on the same lane. The old wild man learned to bow under a saint. The saint learned to walk with a tester in tow. Councils wrote rules. Makers adjusted strap. Families kept the hearth ready for a soft knock and a hard truth given gently. Suppression drew the custom inward, then out again, trimmed and steadied. Gentle summary as the night widens. Bans and warnings came in waves from pulpit and office, often for reasons both wise and blunt. Villagers answered with craft, rules, and quiet persistence. The figure that once rattled chains in public learned when to still them and when to speak. Tradition didn't break, it adapted. And in that adaptation, you can already hear the next sound publish runs returning. Masks newly carved, roots marked with care, as the dark companion steps back into the square with a steadier hand. Regional variants and related spirit. You step across an unseen border, and the dark companion changes shade without losing his job. Alpine culture is a mosaic, shared winter's shape, common logic, but each valley speaks it with its own accent. You'll hear names shift, masks tilt and roles, trade wait guardian in one place, punisher in another, guide or tester elsewhere, while the core pairing with a giver, and the winter rules beneath it stay intact. Start with a family resemblance. Across the Alps, midwinter brings circuits that pair blessing with inspection. A bright figure sant, or luck-bringer, travels with a rough partner. The rough one's features pull from local work and land, horn and hide where herding dominates, bark, root, and straw where forest crafts lead, bone and metal where rock and smithing leave their marks. The why is steady. Materials at hand become symbols that teach. The what adjusts. The companion enforces local priorities. That leads us to the perked traditions, a wide web of customs tied to midwinter judgment, order, and craft. In many valleys perked and split into beautiful and ugly, bright and rough, processional figures who patrol work habits and social vows in the hinge weeks between years. The bright carry promises of good weaving, fair trade, and safe travel. The rough carry switches, soot, or clappers that mark disorder and call for repair. Scholars read these pairs as old as seasonal archetypes, summer and winter, order and wild later, braided into Christian calendars without losing their deeper, practical bite. Moving on quietly, you cross into regions where the dark companion leans more guard than scourge. In Derristrong high pastures, the horned figure's bells are massive, tuned to valley acoustics. They're less about fright and more about reach, sound that stitches farmsteads into one root. The mask's jaw is stern, not savage. The visit checks larches, paths, and stock counts, with correction delivered as a firm nod and a measured tap. Here, the companion reads like a night watchman who remembers the older wild in his bones. Shift a valley, and the same role wears sharper teeth. In places where trade routes run tight and strangers once brought risk, the mask shows more menace at the door. The punisher hue grows, though still bounded by rules. The branch lands with crisper rhythm, questions come faster, and soot marks are common. Yet even here, after the tap, a gift moves, a blessing lands, and the basket sends food down the lane to those with less. The tone is stern, the ethic is shared. Slovenian-influenced zones carried dark companion motifs that emphasized testing speech. Children recite verses as tickers across a threshold between fear and relief. The mask may remain mostly silent, letting bell and chain speak while the giver's voice leads. The boundary work happens with language, say the line, prove the learning, earn the token. The rough figure's glance does the rest. It's the same logic you've walked all night. Discipline and gift, braided tight, tuned here to memory by mouth. Italian borderland echoes lean into craft display. Carving, leatherwork, and metalwork shape masks with marked finesse. Horns sprout with careful curve. Teeth line in patterns that repeat like weaving. Processions thread through steep stone lanes where sound bounces, so clappers and small bells layer texture over the base. These companions feel more like embodiments of the workshop married to the wild art that moves, correcting by presence as much as by tap. The maker's hand is visible. The lesson is that skill tames winter's edge. Related spirits widen the circle. Straw wild men step out in late winter, dragging last year's blight into light, then falling to laughter, an azure cleansing that rhymes with Krampus's boundary sweeps. Masked guilds parade figures who judge craft, smooth shuttles, straight cuts, honest measures. Guardians of bridges and passes blend into the companion's role, reminding travelers and traders that safe crossing is a shared duty. Each variant mirrors its terrain. Steep slopes teach shore footing. Thick forest teaches path marking. Open bowls teach sound as signal. The dark figure is a teacher with 1,000 local examples. Name shift like snow patterns. Some valleys keep Krampus close to Nicholas. Others fold the companion into broader, perked rounds. Elsewhere, the tester walks with a different saint's day, but does the same work. Terminology matters less than functions. Does the rite pair grace and guard? Does it patrol thresholds? Does it leave a trace that turns into work? Those are the checks that tell you you're in the same family, whatever the mask's jawline. A common mistake in outside retellings is to flatten all this into one script or to multiply it into a chaos of unrelated curiosities. The truth sits between. These are variations on a stable theme. The theme is survival with dignity. The melody is gift with rule. The harmony is craft with caution. Local notes add color more. Horn here, more straw there. More speech. More silence, but you can hum the tune across ridges without losing your place. The reason this diversity holds together is ecological. Alpine life ties symbol to task. Where wood is scarce, costumes conserve fur and use paint and soot. Where bells are wealth, sound leads. Where long snowfields demand team travel, the dark companion's role as route keeper grows. These choices aren't poetic flourishing. They're adaptations that keep the right inside daily life, not apart from it. Let me give you one more lens. Think of the companion as a compass rose stamped on each valley's winter map. The north point is boundary doors, barns, bridges. The east is memory verses, names, deeds. The south is Aidford Wood, time shared. The west is restraint rules for fear itself. Every region rotates the rose to match its winds, but the 4 points stay. If you remember nothing else here, remember that shape. It's how all these faces remain one lesson. Winter tests the living and the living answer together. Gentle summary as we set down this map. Regional variants and related spirits don't dilute the dark companion. They ground him. Names, masks, and emphasis change with labor and land. But the pair gift and guard endures. Many faces, one word. Many roots, one rule. Keep the threshold, share the store, bind the wild, and meet the night with steady hands. The revival of Krampus. You walk into a square that feels both old and newly careful. The masks are back in the open, but the roots are marked with ropes, and stewards in bright vests stand at the edges. This is the modern revival Krampus laugh, returning as a public rank. Crafted masks gleaming under cold lights, and a plan pinned to a permit at the town office. The dark companion steps out again, not as a free-for-all, but as a guided procession designed to keep the lesson and lose the harm. Krampuslauf means movement trudged through streets that once held only the house-to-house visit. You hear the shift in sound. Bells still set the base, but loudspeakers now announce start times and safety reminders. There's a map in your hand with zones. Family areas near the stage, craft stalls along one lane, performance corridors where masked groups pass in timed waves. Stewards carry radios. The old choreography meets event management, and the pairing works when done well. Purpose leads, spectacle follows. Craft takes center stage. Masks are carved by dedicated makers, often guilds or workshops that study older forms while developing safe, wearable designs. You see the classic lines: long jaw, arched horns, deep cheek cuts that catch light and shadow. Makers select woods for weight and strength, linden and order for lighter masks, larch or spruce where durability matters. Straps are padded and balanced. Eye and mouth openings are widened for clear sight and breath. The best carvers sign the inside, a quiet mark that ties lineage to quality. Purr is sourced with care. Ethical questions matter now in a way. Older records didn't foreground. Some groups use reclaimed hides or high-grade fur that moves with the same weight and insulates less, making long runs safer. Bells are tuned and strapped to distribute load, often custom cast by bell foundries that serve both agriculture and ritual. When a group passes, the sound is intentional, no random clatter, but chords that a leader calls like cues. Chains return as symbol and sound, but their ends are blunted, links wrapped near hands to prevent injury. Safety checks include inspections for snag hazards, flame-safe treatments on fur near torch effects, and strict no-flame zones around wooden structures. Torches are often replaced by LED lanterns or contained braziers managed by fire crews. You feel the mood, dark, calm, controlled. It's the same winter grammar, translated into public safety language. Purism finds the runs, of course. Crowds travel in, guides explain, cameras rise. The risk is obvious, turning the rite into entertainment and losing its spine. The response in healthy revivals has been to keep the heart visible. Programs explain the pairing with St. Nicholas, even if the saint isn't always present on the run itself. Exhibits show the tools: chain, basket, with notes on meaning and use. Some towns stage a quieter Nicholas night for families and keep the Krampus love as a craft and movement display, both connected by shared messaging, gift with boundary, fear with care. Permits shape the difference from the past. Routes are cordoned. Emergency lanes are kept clear. Alcohol is controlled. Times are fixed. Family windows come first in the evening. Adult gatherings later, with different expectations and visible security. Performers register and train. Group captains drill formations, turning corners wide, setting safe distances, practicing hold and clear signals with hand signs and bell patterns. This is not bureaucracy for its own sake. It's the way a living custom stays public without tipping into hazard. Makers' guilds grow from this revival. You step into a workshop open house, and the bench tells stories. Old photographs line the walls, black and white masks with rougher cuts, inked notes about roots from a century ago. New tools sit beside them, dust masks, clamps, templates that test fit for different head shapes. Young carvers learn from elders, guided by patterns that keep heritage clear, horn types tied to region, jaw lines that echo local style, paint tones drawn from earth pigments rather than loud synthetics. A revival that ignores craft becomes costume. A revival that nourishes craft becomes heritage. Costumes are built for long wear. Weight spreads across hips, not just shoulders. Cooling layers in the undersuit let a performer run without heat stress. Footwear grips, ice and cobble. Even the sound kit shows thought. Some groups use detachable bells to adjust volume for indoor segments or ceremonies. Chain lengths are set so ends don't drag into crowds. Switches are stage saff birch bundles that whisper when swung, not whip. No, you might ask, what's new beyond safety? Two things stand out. First, community service reattaches to the run. Collection points for food and funds sit along the route. The basket is back as a symbol of carrying, and at the end of the night, it carries donations to shelters or families identified by local councils. Public announcements keep this central. Tonight's noise feeds tomorrow's need. You feel the thread tie back to the saint's basket and the winter economy of aid. Second, education runs in parallel. Museums and cultural centers curate exhibits on Alpine winter customs, with panels on pre-Christian roots, the perked traditions, and the Christian pairing with Nicholas. They cite ethnographies who recorded the house-to-house rounds and document suppression periods and revival. Carving demonstrations show how a mask's voice is shaped by mouth, size, and wood thickness. Children's workshops let small hands touch safe replicas of birch and bells while teachers explain boundaries, kindness, and how traditions help communities last. There's an honest debate in these spaces, too. How to keep the dark edge without harm. How to prevent the figure from being stripped of meaning by commercial framing. The more serious groups answer with a simple test. If the run ends without someone's winter being made easier, we've missed the point. So they track outcomes. Wood delivered, food donated, repairs organized. They measure success in work done, not just tickets sold. Differences from the past are plain, and that's good. Night runs are shorter and earlier for families. Adult segments are fenced to keep distance between performers and watchers. Alcohol checkpoints reduce misuse. Noise, curfews, respect neighbors. Insurance requirements push groups to formalize training and risk plans. Some lament the paperwork, but the exchange is fair. Public space carries shared duty. Tradition earns its place by being a good neighbor. International attention adds another layer. The figure travels in media far beyond the Alps. Versions pop up in cities with no snow at all. Quality varies. The best projects invite Alpine makers to teach and consult, avoiding caricature. They explained the pairing with Nicholas, the purpose of birch and chain, and the rule that fear serves care. The weakest copy only the horns and teeth, aiming for shock without context. You can tell the difference by looking for the basket of aid and the list of local needs at the end. If you see those, the route survived the flight. Now, a quiet moment inside the run. You stand just behind a rope line. A group approaches in measured pace, bells lifting and falling like breath. Horns rise and pass. A chain speaks. One's hush and the crowd dims. A child steps forward with a parent's hand and recites a line taught for this night. The lead figure nods, reaches back, and lifts a small parcel into small hands. The old exchange is intact, even here wrapped in permits and LED light. The form changed, the meaning held. Craft guilds keep the old methods alive while making smart concessions. Natural oils finish wood instead of glossy paints that glare under lamps. Stitching follows hide direction to give a suit that moves with the body. Makers log weight and balance for each mask, keeping records so future carvers can learn. Bell tuners test tone against stone walls in the square to avoid frequency that overwhelms or creates distress for animals. Stewards take notes on crowd flow so next year's route eases choke points. It's iterative care, the same logic that once adjusted birch taps and chain cues inside a home, now applied to a square. Why do people return to this figure when the season already glows with lighted windows and bright markets? Roots, rhythm, and contrast. Roots, because the run ties you to older winters and to the craft that your valley or your adopted city claims as part of its story. Rhythm, because the year needs a beat that includes both cheer and check. A December pulse that says prepare as well as celebrate. Contrast. Because joy feels honest when set against a reminder of cost would split, paths cleared, promises kept. You feel a broader cultural hunger here, too. In a time when many rituals are thin or commercial, thick customs draw people in. Thick means layered, marked, funereal, communal. The Krampus revival, when done with care, offers all three. You touch carved wood and heavy bell. You hear the story of winter's tests. You witness neighbors giving and receiving with dignity. That density is restful. It makes sense in the body. Limits remain. Even the bestроен events can slip. Organizers watch for drift toward digression, costume one-upmanship that sacrifices safety, or marketing that flattens the companion into a brand. The fixes are known. Training, codes of conduct, maker standards, and constant return to the pernickous, and the dark companion as a single teaching. Fear serves gift. Gift grounds fear. If that line blurs, the rite loses its soul. Let me show you how a revived night ends well. The square empties in good order. Bins at the donation tent are full. Canned goods, grain-wrapped staples. A post-it note lists where it all goes tomorrow, with volunteers' names and times. Performers gather to debrief, to near misses at a corner. A strap that needs redesign. A child who glowed after the verse. A family who asked for help with wood, already on a list. The masks come off. Faces are sweaty, tired, proud. Someone reads the old charge out loud, walk steady, warn gently, lift the weak, carry the store. The group nods, and the night releases its grip. Gentle summary before we step to meaning beyond the event. The revival brings Krampus back into public a step at a time planned runs. Crafted masks, stewarded routes, and clear rules. Tourism is welcomed but guided. Craft guilds keep wood, fur, horn, and bell traditions alive. Safety changes the frame but not the heart. People return because the figure holds roots and rhythm and gives honest contrast to bright holidays. And beyond the square, the question turns inward. What this dark companion still says to us about living through winters of any kind together. See a painterly winter aesthetic with soft focus realism, blending a warm golden interior glow against cool blue ambient light from the snowy outdoors. Lighting should feel luminous and inviting, with gentle bloom around warm highlights and rich, saturated holiday tones. Shadows are deep but soft-edged, creating a comforting contrast between warmth and cold. The scene carries a nostalgic, storybook quality reminiscent of Thomas Kinkadware atmospheric haze. Snow, shimmer, and dreamy depth give everything a serene, magical winter mood. Subtle hints of Krampus folklore may appear in the environmental silhouettes, Alpine runes, or a quiet sense of something watching from the cold, while Krampus himself is depicted as a towering, horned winter spirit with thick, matted fur, curled ram horns, glowing ember-like eyes, and long, clawed hands wrapped in tattered, ancient cloth. A figure that feels both mythic and rooted in old mountain legend. Cultural meaning. Why Krampus endures, you stand at the edge of the quiet square after the run. And what lingers isn't the mask. It's the shape of the lesson you've been walking all night. Why does Krampus endure? Because the figure holds a paired truth that humans need in winter and in every hard season. Gift and guard, light and shadow. You can't live well with only one. Start with the most practical layer. Winter invites humility. In the Alps, that meant snow, ice, long nights, and thin stores. In your life, it might mean stress, tight budgets, or the sense that the road ahead is fogged over. The dark companion is humility given a voice. He says, you're small in the cold. You need others. You need rules. When you hear his bells, you remember that safety isn't a mood, it's a habit. That memory keeps people gentle with each other and alert to risk. Now set that beside St. Nicholas, and the meaning deepens. Generosity, paired with consequence, is the engine of communal life. If you only hand out gifts, without testing the habits that protect those gifts, waste swallows them. If you only test and never give, people lose heart and stop trying. The pair solves the equation: correction first, then mercy. Mercy that expects growth. It's the same pattern you see in good teaching, good parenting, good leadership. Krampus lasts because he keeps this pairing visible and felt, not abstract. The thing most people miss is how the figure speaks in a universal grammar, not just Alpine code. Birch means boundaries. Chain means restraint. Basket means carrying burdens together. Those images travel across cultures because they map to basic human work. A community that draws lines kindly, binds its vices publicly, and carries weight for the weak is a community that survives winters of every type: economic, emotional, and literal. Krampus, bound to Nicholas, is a winter syllabus for those skills. Tonight, let me hand you one simple analogy you can keep. The hearth glows because the night is dark. You don't stare at a flame in noon sun. You see it best against cold and shadow. Joy is like that. It reads truer when set beside a honest reminder of cost. Krampus is that reminder. He doesn't cancel celebration. He frames it. The nuts, the fruit, the warm drink tastes better after the bells pass and the rod taps your sleeve. You understand that warmth isn't an accident. It's a choice renewed. Speaking of choice, the figure endures because he makes responsibility feel communal, not private shame. A mask can say hard things without humiliating. A bell can gather attention without a lecture. A soot mark can stand in for 1,000 words of nagging. These cues help people accept correction as belonging to all of us. In winter, that spirit saves time and face. In any season, it prevents fractures that come from future prompting. Krampus helps a village, any village practice. Truth with gentleness. There's another layer. You've walked quieter but steady. Nature has a voice in this rite. Horns, fur, hoof, wood, belolled from land and herd and hand. Krampus endures because he's nature rendered his counsel. Don't waste, don't boast. Don't forget that you depend on soil, stock, and weather. In an age that pulls people from land into screens, a figure made of wood and hide speaks in a register you can feel. It recalibrates the senses. The sound of a real bell and the weight of a real mask remind you your body is part of the learning. You might wonder how this plays out beyond postcards and parades. It shows up in habits that last. Households that walk with a pair tend to tie chores too, meaning sweeping a threshold is protection, not just tidiness. Community service lines up with ritual collections and deliveries tied to a night of shared memory. Children learn that facing fear in a safe frame builds strength, not bravado. Adults learn that restraint enrolls no grabbing, no showy fright builds trust. Ritual trains the small muscles of daily care. And now, a brief word on faith and folklore. Krampus endures precisely because he was never meant to be worshipped or feared for his own sake. He serves a story larger than himself. In Christian framing, he kneels to mercy. In older custom, he serves communal survival. Either way, he's not the center. He's the shadow that makes the center clear. Traditions survive when their symbols point beyond themselves to work that matters: feeding, guarding, teaching, binding. This one does. The educational value is plain when you look at outcomes. Where the custom stays healthy, you see clear boundaries phrased as invitations rather than threats. You see young performers trained in safety and service before they earn horns. You see elders listsward to split paths to sand folded into the night's close. You see museums and schools explain roots without romanticizing harm. You see the basket reattached to aid, not just to image. These are signs that a figure isn't coasting on shock. It's carrying weight. Common mistakes in the modern telling hide the meaning. One is exaggerating menace, flattening the companion into a bogeyman that sells fast. But it cuts the cord to mercy and makes fear the point. Another is sanding off the dark edge until only cuteness remains. That sells too, but it empties the lesson. The endurance of Krampus sits between those errors. He's bound but present. He's stern but careful. He reminds but under watch. That balance is the craft. Let me show you how the figure speaks to a broader human rhythm. Every life has thresholds. Starting a job, welcoming a child, grieving a loss, facing a diagnosis, moving house. Thresholds call for both gift and guard. You need someone to bring warmth and someone to check the latch. The Krampus-Nicholas pair is a threshold tool. When communities keep it alive, they practice for bigger crossings. They learn how to welcome and warn at the same door, which is what good neighbors and good institutions do. The reason this tradition stays relevant is that it keeps telling the truth about risk without despair. Winter is dangerous. People are forgetful. Tools slip, paths ice, tempers fray. And yet, with rules and shared care, you get through. The dark companion names the danger. The saint names the grace. The walk between doors is the path between those names. In a noisy age, a custom that states this so clearly becomes an anchor. You can also measure endurance by adaptability. Krampus survived bans, urbanization, tourism, and global media, because communities kept translating the call. They shifted from torches to lanterns, from ad hoc rounds to permitted routes, from private aid to public drives. They didn't cling to one form. They protected the function. Teach vigilance, pair it with giving, and bind the wild under love. Traditions that adapt like this are hard to uproot because they keep meeting real needs. For a moment, consider memory. People come of age under these bells. They remember the first soot mark on their cheek and the relief of a nut in the hand after a halting verse. Years later, they stand inside the fur and make a child's night feel the same. Arc fear, focus, relief, warmth. That continuity builds a local archive in the body. It's not written in books alone. It's carried in breath and gait and the muscle memory of a birch tap that whispers, not whips. Cultures with embodied archives weather change better than those with slogans alone. There's a civic lesson here, plain as the sound of chain. Power should be bound. Even the role that carries fear must answer to rules, to a saint's eye, to a council's code. When a community rehearses that constraint every year, it trains itself to distrust unbounded force in any costume, political, social, or personal. Krampus endures because he models restraint on stage, so restraint has a script off stage. Now, you might be thinking, I don't live in the Alps. Why should this matter to me? Because the structure travels. Find your winter your pressure season and ask what pair you're missing. Where do you need a Nicholas to bring gift and a bound, wild thing to insist on boundaries? Maybe it's in work culture, where praise without standards hollows teams and standards without praise grind them down. Maybe it's in family life, where generosity needs a spine and rules need a heart. The figure gives you a picture to carry into those rooms. If you remember nothing else, hold this. Rituals last when they help people do necessary things with less friction and more grace. Krampus, walking with Nicholas, helps people face danger without cruelty and enjoy gifts without waste. He turns fear into a tool and kindness into a duty. That's why he's still here. Let me end this meaning with a small, steady picture. Tonight, the square is emptying. A steward coils a rope. A carver wipes a mask with oil and checks a strap for wear. A parent pockets a smudged napkin, and a child sleeps, the nutshell in their palm. Somewhere, a list is on a table, wood to deliver paths to sand, neighbors to visit. The dark companion's work is done, which means tomorrow's work can start. The hearth glows, and the night is, as it must be, dark enough to make that glow guide your eyes back home. Gentle summary, so you carry it with ease. Krampus endures, because he holds the pair humans need, gift with guard, joy with memory of cost, humility with courage. He's nature speaking caution, community practicing care, and ritual binding fear to service. He lasts not for shock, but for use. With that meaning clear, you can walk back to your own door and let the old winter teacher keep quiet watch as you rest. Closing reflection. You return to the quiet room. Snow softens the street outside. Embers settle in a slow red hush. After bells and birch and chain, the stillness feels earned. You stand at your own threshold, the same line we kept drawing all night, and the rule is simple again: in, safe, out, cold. That small truth steadies you. Tonight we walked the old winter path together, saint and shadow, gift and garden, till the square emptied and the masks were hung. Now the figures step back into their boxes, but the lessons don't. They sit in the tools by your door, the broom that redraws a line, the list that binds a promise, the basket that waits for what you'll carry to someone who needs it. You don't need horns on the wall to practice this. You only need the rhythm, correct in time, share what lasts, keep the latch. Speak gently and plainly. These are Alpine rules turned human rules. They work as well in thin snow as in thin weeks, in old valleys and in new lives. Imagine your room as a small village. The lamp is your fire, the floor your square. You can stage the pair here whenever you need it, before a hard task. Bring a gift of warmth and a guard of order. Praise what's good. Name what must change. Then step through your own door and do one small thing that proves you listened. Sweep, mend, call, or carry. The wild is still out there, as it should be. It keeps you humble, but it's not sovereign. You've learned its grammar, the sound of approach, the pause at the threshold, the mark that leaves memory without harm. That grammar turns fear into a handle, so you can hold it without burning and set it down when the work is done. So rest now. Let the old companion keep watch in silence, bound to service, no longer needing to rattle his chain. Let Nicholas's quiet generosity linger in the shape of a list on your table. The hearth glows because the night is dark. That contrast guides your eye back to what matters scare order, and the steady courage to meet winter with others. Sleep, then, when you wake, the path will be there. Bells far off. Snow light at the sill. your hands ready, and the custom you carried tonight will return in smaller, gentler ways. Each one a door you can open without fear.